So you have wandered into a session called Preparing a Staff for Major Change. I hope that was your intention. But there are several pieces that can kind of get us going. The first being, I'd like you to join the chat. So here's the chat, todaysmeet.com/RH-FETC. Please join the chat. If you have any device sitting around where you can share your ideas, all the better, because a session that includes the insights of the talents and experience of everybody in the room rather than just one person, kind of blah, blah, blahing, is going to be far, far better. So please join that chat if you would. And I'm about to leave that particular slide. When I do, you may, if you are kind of moving in a little slowly here, you might need to connect with somebody else at the table for that link. But if you've already got it, awesome. But please do have that chat open. All right. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story that involves some change. And let's paint a picture for you. In the 2013-2014 school year, a high school in the San Francisco Bay Area made 3 moves with its school, each of which could easily be counted as a major change. So the first thing they did was they launched a BYOD program. So all of the shifts in teaching practice that come from moving to one-to-one, that was a part of the change for the 2013-2014 school year. In addition, they went full-on Google Apps for Education. So they fully adapted that, meaning that now you've got tools for large-scale collaboration that are going to be school-wide for the first time. That's a big change as well. Finally, for good measure, they changed a period schedule that had been in place for 40 years to an A-B block schedule. All 3 of these changes took place in the same year. That's seriously a lot of change, right? So, consequently, I want to know what you would expect the outcome of such a set of changes to be if you were to do this at your school. All right, so if at your school you were going to do all 3 of these, I want you to tell me what you think would be the outcome. Somebody who's already in the chat, I want you to add this link to the chat so that everybody else can just click it from there. But go to this survey. We're going to take a minute or two, and I want you to just respond. There's a scale question, 1 to 10, where 10 is like, that's no problem at all. We totally make that work easily. And 1 is, that kind of thing, right? So do the 1 to 10, and then if you want to add a comment, feel free. But please add your thoughts on that issue, right? So 3, huge changes, 1 year, how would it go at your school? Wave at me if you have taken the survey. You've done the survey, all right? Wave at me if you are in the midst of taking the survey and I've interrupted that process. Got it, okay. So as we're finishing that up, let me step aside from this for just a moment so I can talk about you, who you are. I'm going to ask you to do a lot of hand raising over the next few minutes, the next few seconds, really. So if what I describe is you, please raise your hand, that kind of thing. Everybody participate, that kind of stuff. First of all, how many of you are classroom teachers? Where are you? Okay, good. How many of you are campus administrators? Campus administrators, where are you? Okay, good chunk of you guys. District administrators, where are y'all? Okay. How many of you are support team for learning, teaching and learning at your school or district? All right. I'm guessing I got almost everybody with that one. All right. So it's good to have that sense. Second thing is this. How many of you are at a traditional public school? Traditional public school or district? Okay. How many of you are at a public charter school? All right. Got a handful of y'all in the room as well. Cool. How many of you are at private religious schools? Okay. Good chunk of y'all. How many of you are private independent schools? Okay. Number of y'all as well. Okay, good. All right. Another question. How many of you are involved in change efforts at your school or district? You are involved. It's kind of an are you paying attention question, I think, all right? Now, how many of you are leading that effort at your school or your district? Wow, a ton of y'all. Well, good to have you in here. I certainly hope to live up to the title of the session. One more question for you. How many of you, actually a pair of questions, how many of you were at the Jane McGonigal keynote yesterday? How many of you who were at the Jane McGonigal keynote yesterday collected chocolate bars from seats that had not been, If you were sitting far back and you're like, what, there was chocolate? Sorry to break that on you. It's just good to know who's in the room, right? So we'll start with that, all right? So for me, I am a former high school teacher of Japanese language. I am a former principal of a K-12 school and an online high school, and I now run a little nonprofit called Next Vista for Learning. It's an online library of videos by and for teachers and students everywhere. My own little attempt to save the world from ignorance, one creative video at a time. Happy to help out with that. So that's who I am. As a part of that work, I visit schools and districts and conferences around the world in order to work with teams of administrators, teams of students, teams of teachers, in order to be able to talk about what is possible, what can we make happen. And I like doing that kind of stuff because it gives me the chance to encounter all sorts of different ideas. I've worked with all the different kinds of schools I talked about before. Traditional public, charter schools, religious schools, independent schools, and I like getting into different settings in order to get a sense of what it is that makes that particular school distinctive in some way. So a little bit about how this session will work. First of all, in looking at something like major change, let's be real blunt about this. There are no easy answers, right? There just are no easy answers. Any valuable and memorable effort involves grappling with complexity. Any valuable and meaningful effort involves grappling with complexity. If it were easy, it would already be done and on a widespread scale. So we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of what pieces, in what ways might be useful to you in some fashion. So let's get back to the school that I started with. So that school, right, started a BYOD program, went one-to-one with BYOD. They adopted Google Apps as their collaborative system, and they changed a 40-year-old bell schedule. And I'll add one other thing that I didn't tell you a minute ago, which is this. There was a horrendous denial of service attack on their network in the first few weeks of that school year. Now, that means that it's kind of an interesting thought of like, wow, that's an awful lot of change in 1 year. Let's see what you guys said about whether that would work for you. So on a 1 to 10, how might this work out? And we're going to take a look at the summary of responses. And we had 2 at 9 and something like 37 between 1 and 4. All right, fine. Lots of comments as well. If you are interested in the comments that were a part of this, feel free to email me at the end of the session. I'll be happy to get you access to all of this. If that's of value to you, I'm happy to share it for sure. But without a doubt, the basic thought is that, probably wouldn't go so well. That's a lot of change at once. So let me give you kind of a sense of how it went for this particular school. The first few weeks were rough due to that denial of service attack. I mean, with 2 of the 3 changes depending on your network, that's going to make a difference. However, no major damage, and they were able to kick into gear once they figured out what was going on. At the end of the semester, they polled their staff and their students. The staff, in responding to each of the 3 major changes, were between 65% and 90% positive or very positive about each change. And all 3 of those efforts continued into the spring and then into this school year. They surveyed the students. The students were overwhelmingly positive about the change. So if you look at something like this and you say, well, how do they pull that off? I mean, how does that work? How do you bring that level of change into a school and have it work? Because I'm sure we've all heard stories of, it not working, right? So how do we work with this? First of all, let me tell you about the school. It's useful to just know about the school. This school is Serra High School in San Mateo, California, alma mater of Tom Brady, by the way. It's a private Catholic boys' high school. There's about 800 students with about 70 full-time teachers on the staff. The students come from a wide variety of economic and ethnic backgrounds. The class sizes vary tremendously from quite small classes in the teens to quite large classes in the 30s, right? The school is absolutely not awash in cash. And finally, there is a union that represents the teachers at that school and a set of sister schools, and tenure is a part of the professional environment. So that you know kind of what that school is. In a sense, it's like loads of traditional public schools with regard to the things I just described. And lots of other schools those different characteristics are going to match in some fashion. So let's look at the key pieces of their success. The first one that I'm going to mention is, I think, a bit counterintuitive, and that's this. Doing those changes all at once may have helped. You with me? The idea that you're going to do a really big change, one really big change in 1 year, and then another really big change in another year, and then another really big change in a third year, that's 3 years of big change. If you have all 3 big changes in 1 year, there's a certain amount of we're all in this together, and let's deal with it and just see what happens. Now, that's not the extent of it. Well, if you just load lots of change, it'll work. Now, obviously, that's not the thing, right? But that is a piece of it. And it surprised, I think, a number of people watching this as a process. Wow, it was really cool that so many things came together well. Now, they did certain things that are specific to some of the changes we discussed. So, for example, with one-to-one, they were able to avoid the hype that surrounds particular devices. That's a big deal, because a number of sister schools were going headlong into one particular device. And they held back to say, well, no, wait, let's see how that goes. That was a good move on their part, because they were able to see, okay, there are the things that they're running into as big problems. There are the things that seem to be working really well for them. How do we take advantage of the strengths and avoid the pitfalls? Another really big piece of this for Sarah was they took their time. They took their time. That's a big, whopping piece of their success. Because when you want a major change to happen, you're going to have to ease into it. Top-down typically is just not the way to go. Finally, they heavily involved their teachers in exploring the possibilities associated with each change. Now, if you are looking to replicate something along these lines in some fashion for your school, what should you know, right? So I'm going to integrate these ideas with some of the specific changes that they did in the hope that this will really help you out. And let's get back to that last one first. Heavily involve your teachers. Heavily involve your teachers. For major change, a strong majority of every stakeholder group is going to need to be on board, but it needs to start with your teachers. They're going to lead it because they're the ones who professionally will be dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. So the teachers absolutely have to be on board. Now, I don't think that that's particularly profound. Your teachers want to be on board with the change you want to make. I get it, right? But where do you start the conversation with them so this can happen? Let's start this way. Let's recognize that every single school has room for improvement. That's actually something worth saying with your group. Because often people think, we're successful, why do we need to make a change? No, every single school has room for improvement. If that weren't the case, there would be perfect schools out there, and we could take a look at them and do what they're doing, and we'd be fine, right? But that's just not the case. So if that's the case, how do people then react to the idea of improvement? Well, let's get 2 things out of the way. One is this. Change for the sake of change does not make a lot of sense. Nor does not changing for the sake of not changing. You with me? Change because you want to change doesn't make sense. Not changing because you don't want to change makes no sense either. Consequently, we have to stop and say, okay, well, what is it we're doing then? Our job is to figure out the possibilities. We want to figure out what the possibilities and challenges are with any particular change. How do we go about this? Well, I think the schedule change is a good example, right? If this is something that's going to change in a school with a lot of tradition, a lot of community that thinks about the school in a particular way, how do you make this case? You make the case by starting with the leadership, the administration, and the teachers, making sure that these are people who can explain both sides of the discussion for change. They have to be able to speak to the strengths and weaknesses of each side. That's part of it. And you need a basic framing question for this change as well. Here's the framing question I'll give you. What will the change allow to happen? What will that change allow your school to experience, your students to experience, that not making the change wouldn't? Now, the reverse question is equally interesting, right? What does not making the change preserve? Do you have something going so well that it's actually a major risk to make a change? exploring that question in gory detail can be very helpful for trying to get to this. So when we look at something like this, we say, okay, well, that's our framing question. What is it we do with these questions? Well, you get teams together who go and they do a lot of research. They do school visits. Right? This is a standard approach. Where a lot of schools begin to drop the ball is after the research, after the school visits, making time to debrief. Are teachers getting together and really talking through the strengths and the weaknesses of the things they've seen? Is that time made available? Are you spending money, for example, getting people to cover classes so that teachers can get together and say, what is it we saw? Would that work for us? Why or why not? Your teachers and your administrators have to be able to speak to both sides of the change. Often we get a camp that's advocating for one and a camp that's advocating for the other. Everybody needs to be able to speak to both sides. That means you now have a set of people who can communicate with a larger community in a way that will be constructive for the organization and lead you to a place where you are more likely to make an informed decision about how to go. Now, if we think about going one-to-one as a piece of this as well, right? And it's hard to imagine a more profound change to the learning environment than having every student in the room with an internet-connected device. So if that's the case, if you're looking at going one-to-one, for example, how many of you are? You're like, that's one of the major changes we're looking at, right? A lot of you. This too easily becomes about the device, right? You've got people coming at you saying, well, we really need to all have a blah, 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 whatever that thing may be. And you got parents saying, oh, no, this is what's happening over at this other school. Why aren't we doing that? That kind of stuff. And you always come back to the framing question. We're looking to see what will be best for our learning environment. What will getting any particular device mean? We may find a better device than the one that other school is using. And if so, we want to make sure that your children are experiencing that best possible world of what these devices can bring. Okay, fine. And by the way, here's a little extra. This is a little extra for this session. You came in, ready for just kind of discussion of major change. I'm going to tell you what the perfect device is. I'm going to break from my presentation just long enough to tell you the perfect device. Some of you are like, you've got to be kidding me. This is like worth twice the cost of the conference if you're telling us that. That's what I'm here to do. You're like, you got to be kidding. No. Here it is. It's coming. You ready? The perfect device does what you need when you need it done. Some of you are like, well, that was disappointing. Right. But there are no easy answers. Different devices work well in different settings, at different age levels, for different purposes, different learning purposes. What works really well for assistive technology and the kind of apps that may be available for that may not be nearly what you need for a group of people who are concentrating on developing collaborative skills with writing. So you have to kind of say, okay, well, what is our setting? And for what you do, the question is simply, what do I need? I don't need a device. I need the device to do certain things. Focus on that kind of thing. That will help. I will now go back to our regularly scheduled presentation. Now, I think that if that's where we are, where we really stop and we say, it's about the learning. It's about the learning. How do we get the kids engaged in their learning? How do we make that happen? Now, we think about the framing question I gave you a minute ago. What will the change allow to happen for learning? As you look at one-to-one, the question, of course, is what will the device allow for learning? What will any given device allow to happen? Everyone needs to be able to speak to the strengths and weaknesses of any given device, just like any given change. That's a part of it. Now, thinking about that way, any given change, whether it's about a bell schedule, whether it's about adopting tablets, whether it's about bringing in a bunch of Chromebooks, whatever it may be, you're going to need training. People are going to need to get up to speed on the possibilities of the schedule, the device, whatever it may be, the collaborative system. Consequently, do not skimp on training. No matter how well prepared you are in terms of being able to argue something, if your people aren't ready to really imagine how that happens in the classroom, you're in a difficult shape. They need to know how to move forward. They need to know how this is going to work for what they do on a day-to-day basis. Now, that also involves having loads of information available both to the school community and the larger parent and student community. So the link on this slide, you guys are going to get these slides, by the way, right? So if you want them, and that'll contain links to the things that you do. This is an example of the work that was done at St. John's Lutheran 7 years ago. This is in Southern California. But they put together a set of web pages that really said, this is what we're looking to do. And in so doing, they were able to bring the community along in a way that kept elements of the community from interrupting the process in bad ways, shall we say. All right, so that kind of thing is part of how you bring about a change. You make sure the information is out there, which is much easier when everybody can speak to the strengths and weaknesses in any particular approach, change, device. Now, the last piece from what we talked about there had to do with the collaborative system that they brought on, all right? And I think this really has to do with exploration. No matter what kind of change you're doing, you want this change to become something that allows the staff at a school to begin to say, we see each other as professionals, we interact with each other as professionals, we make great things happen for our students. We do that. How do you do that? You make sure that there is a sense of exploration. Now, having something like collaborative tools to make this happen, where people are really working together to say, okay, let's see what this can do, makes a lot of sense. Because that leads into the discussion of, okay, why are we making a change? The only reason you ever make a change is because you feel you can improve. You can make it a little better. That's why we do the changes, right? Now note the difference between those two ideas. Everybody is in favor of improvement. And you get loads of people who are a little skeptical about change. Improvement and change. Can you have improvement without any change? No. No. But the two words come across in different ways. I am not suggesting that really what we're talking about is bad marketing, right? Trying to get people to just kind of embrace an idea based on the buzzword we stick to it. That's not it at all. Instead, what we want to do is we want to say, okay, what we want to make happen is to make sure that people on the team, people in the community are aware. Aware of what? They have a clear sense of the alternatives and a clear sense as to what the choice is. We've made this choice for these reasons. When people have that kind of clear in mind, they tend to be in much better shape. So having chosen, in Sarah's case, Google Apps for their discussion, right? So you think about Google Apps. Why did they do it? Well, in part because it breaks free of a certain kind of location constraint related to learning activities. In part, it's because it increases the role and speed of feedback. That makes sense as well. In part, it's because you want to make sure people don't reinvent the wheel. Okay, fine. Now, there are other collaborative systems out there. I'm highlighting Google simply for two reasons. One is because that's the one that this particular school chose. And the second is because Google just has a huge advantage at the moment. But that won't last. Nothing lasts forever, right? So how do you, as a community, in looking at different kinds of changes, how do you make sure you're aware of what those things might be? So engage in discussions about the things that are out there now. How do you find out about it with a very busy schedule? Well, you do things like you follow EdSurge. How many of you are on the EdSurge newsletter? All right? Those of you who do not have your hands up, I encourage you to get on EdSurge's newsletter. These are free, but it's a wonderful discussion of the things that people are looking at as new possibilities for teaching and learning. Another thing that I would encourage you to do is get on Twitter. Get on Twitter. Follow the EdChat hashtag. Now, there's a lot of content there. People are putting a lot of different ideas in the EdChat tag, but you can find people who are talking about things that may have a direct impact on the thing you're trying to do. Contact them. Start a message with their handle at knows a lot about schools. Hey, we're about to do this and this. Got any ideas? Can't hurt to grab ideas from out there, and that's an easy way to make it happen. Now, in that space, amidst the din, there are great insights. So make sure you've got people who are really looking for those by following those kinds of conversations. Now, technology is a great vehicle for looking at change for obvious reasons, right? We're all constantly learning the technologies that are out there. Now, free technologies are especially good. They're especially good because it means you can explore possibilities without the barrier of cost. I think at one level, that's a fairly obvious thing to have said. At another, it's like, wait, if you can get your people exploring possibilities with free technologies and beginning the process of talking with each other about possibilities with those technologies, especially if they have to move from understanding what's possible with the free to making decisions about what they might buy, then you want them to be in a space where it's not just what a vendor told them, but instead it's that space where, well, we've tried this, and we understand that we can make this leap with what we're doing if we were to spend money in this fashion. That helps. So when you get people talking with each other about what they've tried with free technologies, you're building teamwork, and that teamwork is what you need to overcome persistent challenges in order to make the changes you want. So for any change at all, your people need to have confidence in each other. This requires three things, as I see it. It requires listening carefully, it requires asking lots of questions, and being willing to explore both the possibilities and challenges with any given option, any given idea, any given path to where you want to be. None of this is particularly profound, but it is so often left out of what people do. But if you have this kind of framework in front of you, we need to make sure we're not missing any of these pieces, then you're going to be in much better shape. So let's go back to the idea of change for change's sake, not changing for not for the sake of not making a change, right? You'll always have people who resist everything. You'll always have those folks. No, we tried that 20 years ago. Did we? Okay, fine, right? You're going to have those folks. You also have folks who will leap on any given fad as well. Now, I'm going to describe them as the extremes. And if those are the extremes, then your leadership needs to be trusted to listen and thoughtfully evaluate any particular set of options. That's so that the extremes do not carry the conversation in your professional environment. Now, if it's a challenge for people to trust leadership for these things, then leadership needs to earn the trust of the team so that the team will listen and thoughtfully evaluate and trust the leaders to do so as well. Let's return to this unchanging piece in the talk about change. Every school has room for improvement. Every school does. Whether to act on that is a function of understanding these alternatives. Now, I started this session with a story about Sarah High School and its changes. Big changes that all happened in 1 year. And interestingly, the success that was a part of that. I have worked with them for the last 4.5 years. So I've seen that they put lots of time into putting these things together. Let me quickly say, these successes are not due to me, right? I helped, but the successes really are a function of their willingness to listen to each other and explore ideas. That is the key piece. If you want to make any change, foster that. What kinds of discussions happen? Will people listen to each other? Will people begin to explore possibilities together? Will they do that? Now, I'm going to finish with a second story, all right? And this story is about a tradition my wife and I have. So every year, at the end of the year, at the tail end of December, we go up to San Francisco, and we get a hotel room, and we do things like walk around. We'll get up early in the morning and go to the Golden Gate Bridge, walk across, look back over at the city, walk back. We got a little crazy this year. We went and saw 2 movies. That's big for us. Okay. So on the night of the 30th, Tabitha and I walked into the AMC Van Ness 14, right? And I went up to the counter where they sell the tickets, and I said, I'd like 2 tickets for The Imitation Game. By the way, fabulous movie, very, very good. I'd like 2 tickets for the Imitation Game. Woman looked back at me and said, that'll be $13.98. I thought, rock and roll, that's an awesome price for 2 movie tickets in San Francisco. Friend gets to the next window right at that time, says, I'd like 1 ticket for The Imitation Game. Person tells her, that'll be $11.98. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe there's like a special promotion or something for couples or something. So we go, we watch the movie. The movie's amazing. My wife and I returned to the theater the next night in order to watch the final Hobbit movie, right? Got to do that. And I said, I'll take 2 tickets for the Hobbit. She said, well, that'll be $23.98. I said, okay, willing to pay that. I will say, though, that when I was here last night, it only cost us $13.98. She said, really? I said, yeah. I said, did you have like some kind of promotion going for couples or anything like that? She said, oh, no. I said, well, what would yield 2 $6.99 tickets? She said, oh, you must have gotten the senior discount. Now, I was not asked, excuse me, sir, but I'd just like to find out, would you qualify? No, I didn't get that. I just got the discount. Right. Now, why do I tell you this story? I tell you this story because I believe a certain amount of change is inevitable. A certain amount of change is inevitable. And like that extra $10 that I ended up with, some aspects of that change will be welcomed. It will end up being welcomed. Now, I hope that whatever change may be on the horizon for your schools, that the exploration itself will be part of what makes the school a great place to learn and a great place to teach. So, with that, I have, quite unusually for me, successfully finished in order to be able to take some questions. And I want you to stay in touch. Some information about this slide. That's me 10 years ago. You can tell via the hair. And there's my email, there's my Twitter address, right? Loads of student and teacher created videos that are very short, at the next one right there. Loads of free resources in that fourth one, nextvista.org/resources. Tons of freebies that I've been collecting for years, and why you should care, by the way. Not just here's a link, but here's a link, here's what people do with it, in brief, right? Then there's a newsletter. I would love for you to sign up for the newsletter. Once a month, I send out information on videos that we've added to the site, different cool things I've run across, and things that I think are inspiring in one form or another. I'd love for you to take a moment and sign up. It'll only take a moment, right? Make sure to also do the evaluation for the conference. And then there are these slides, right? So that last tinyurl.com will get you to all of the slides I just showed you, which includes things like links to the St. John's BYOD information pages, things like that. Feel free, right? And I'd love to stay in touch with you. So with that, what I would like to do is open up for a few questions, depending on how quickly I can answer them. I will certainly have you out of here by 12:40, right? But let's start. What kind of questions do you have related to perhaps this wildly stressful thing that is you're responsible for leading us through change? Do we have some questions? Yes?
We're embarking on trying to convince our faculty they need to change and adopt a new LMS, or learning management system.
Yes.
We've pulled in a dozen learning management vendors, and we're in this horrible process of listening to all of them.
Right.
And I'm hearing from the underground
Uh-huh.
the top will make the decision, and this is a waste of our time.
Okay.
How do you combat that or get them on board for a new LMS?
Got it. So if you didn't hear the question, the bit is about the school is going to adopt a new LMS, a new learning management system. They've had a dozen different vendors come in to talk about their products and services, and the teachers some of the teachers are thinking, it really doesn't matter what kind of time we put in this. The top's going to make a decision, and we're just going to have to live with that. Okay, so a couple of questions for you real quick. How recently did the staff learn that there would be a new LMS?
3 months ago.
And when is the LMS supposed to kick into gear?
September of next year.
Okay, of 16? The next school year. Okay, that's a very short time frame, and can lead to people being skeptical about the value of their input for sure, right? What I would do, though, is I would make sure that leadership looks at this and says, let's live or die by the teacher's decision. Let's get them to say, what are the ones that really stand out to us? Bring those together. Say, okay, here are the 5 that people were interested in. Of these, let's take another month. What do you think? And at the end of that, say, okay, well, here are the 2 that stood out from among those 5. Let's take another month. Get another vote. Say, we're going to live or die by this one. Because even if that LMS turns out to be a bit of a disaster, sometimes it happens, the chances are good that when you think about disaster, it comes from things other than the qualities of the LMS system itself, right? It has to do with the nature of the discussion. If the leadership has said, we'll go with what the teachers choose, then even if it doesn't work out, you have established a certain kind of tone that will allow you to get to a better place. The best thing that may come out of that exploration is not the LMS, but a new way of looking at working together. So if leadership can say, you know, whatever this does for LMS, it's our chance to show the teachers that we'll go with their thought on this. But to take at least a few months to work through that system of winnowing it down to there's this, there's this, there's this. And trying to make sure that you've got several teachers gathering those strengths, weaknesses for each one and getting that information in a good place. Good luck with that. All right. Another question right over here. Nice addition. And let me recapture that real quick, especially for the recording. Don't forget the students in getting their input on the kind of change you may make with an LMS or anything, right? What kinds of things do they say really appeal to them? And by making sure that's a part of the process, you're getting more buy-in from your staff as well. Nice comment. Thank you. Are there other questions? Yes, right here. Great question just came on. Let me recapture that for everybody. All right, so two high schools in the district, both of which got 500 Chromebooks as part of a pilot to see if this would work out well. At one of the schools, and these schools are like 6 miles apart, you said, one of the schools, they flew with it. Everything's going great, and at their school now, they've got one-to-one Chromebooks. At the other school, just kind of fizzled, nothing particularly impressive happened, and they're still floundering, and you're like, well, what do we do now? Because there's this sense that it's unbalanced. All right. The first thing I would say is that sense of it being unbalanced is part of the problem. Even though you're talking about the same population, really, and kind of the same, all kinds of demographics are kind of right there in terms of the same. The culture at any given school is a function of what personalities and talents are happening on that staff. And so you had people at the first school that looked at these tools and said, this is going to be great, and leapt on it. Cool. You don't need for it to be balanced. You just need for the learning to be amazing in both places. So by going back to the second school and say, okay, we don't need to sit here and berate you for not being that other school. Tell us what would allow dynamic learning to happen here in a way that might be different from this school. You tell us, and let's see what we can make happen. So if that becomes the kind of conversation that happens at the school, they don't feel like they are the stepchild in the arrangement, right? And instead, you've got an opportunity to use that whole experience as a way of getting them to think, okay, actually we are a part of a professional team here. And that can be really powerful. Yep. Well, we're at 12:39, so I'm going to finish this way. But before I do, I will invite you, if you have questions about this, feel free to come on up. I'm happy to talk to you. If I can say something that will save you loads of time and energy and stress and money, that's why else would we be here, right? So I'm very happy to talk to you. For that newsletter thing, I finish the newsletter the same way every month, and I'll finish this session with that line now. May you inspire and be inspired each and every day. Thank you very much for coming to this session.